1996. Her father found her body in their home basement later that day. Her father says more needs to be done to solve his daughter's murder, which is why he's pushing his petition to get an independent agency to use the very latest technology to conduct more DNA testing. Ramsey started his petition 3 days ago. It has nearly 1,500 signatures.
That was Fox's Christina Coleman. I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations. We're already Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate, put cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Where let's put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, especially on a Red Shirt Monday, which is what today is. You'll notice if you take a look at my shirt, you'll notice I'm wearing a red shirt. And if you're colorblind and you can't recognize the red shirt when you see it, pay special attention to the first item on the card, which is called systemic racism. So here we are on the first Monday in May. So since it's the first Monday, I'm going to go through the Tall Tales rules of engagement. As popular as Tall Tales is, I know there are new tailgaters joining us every day, some of whom may not understand some of the customs and traditions of Tall Tales. So I got a couple pages of well-chosen words here that are called the Tall Tales Rules of Engagement, which I'll go through to bring everybody up to speed on how the Tall Tales show works. And, of course, it works very well. Everybody knows that. Listen to radio talkers, read the blogs and blog comments in the papers, check out the conversations in bars and coffee shops, and it soon becomes apparent that answers are often more abundant than questions concerning the important issues of the day. One of the functions of Tall Tales will be to state the questions for the answers that many seem so sure of, and then respond to those questions. Here are some of the answers that will be dealt with in the coming weeks, not necessarily in the order of their occurrence or importance. Number 1, you can carry any gun anywhere at any time. Number 2, we're second-class citizens. Number 3, there should be term limits for senators. Number 6, only Chamorros are going to vote on Guam's political status. Number 7, Guam should be decolonized. Number 23, political signs should be posted on private property only. Number 24, there's no competition in the price of gasoline on Guam. So those are the answers. And I will provide the necessary questions. Once you understand the question, you may not be so sure of those answers. And then that's 1 through 24. And then in addition to that, there's 0, 00, and 000. Item number 0 goes like this. Bob doesn't know what he's talking about. So you can always call up and say, hey, Bob, you don't know what you're talking about. 00, Bob still doesn't know what he's talking about. And then we've got 000, Bob, you still don't know Jack, which regulars know isn't exactly accurate because come time to head for Churchill Downs, oftentimes I do know Jack. So I've got that list of 24 topics that I can always resort to if I run out of things to talk about during the show. The list is not to suggest that there aren't plenty of other interesting questions or answers to take up every day. There are, and they can be addressed. Usually serious and sometimes humorous, Tall Tales will examine current events, government and politics, and occasionally drift into history, culture, religion, law, and once in a great, great while, but only very, very cautiously, rumors and gossips. Tall Tales is structured, but can often entertain whatever callers want to discuss. Tall Tales is an issue-driven, fact-oriented, interactive talk show that invites audience participation. It has been the top-rated FM afternoon show in Micronesia. The Point is Pika's best radio station for 2022. Now, here are some facts and some no-nos. They say everybody knows that. Well, we've always done it that way. There's no doubt in my mind. No, that's not how we do it on Tall Tales. How about a little analysis and some critical thinking? Caveat, don't look for an abundance of common sense on Tall Tales. Your common sense is what tells you that the world is flat, that iron ships could never float, and that an object that is heavier than air could never fly. Of course, common sense is to be valued, but not when it's a synonym for reverence for the status quo or timidity. While an instant and firm grasp of the obvious may occasionally be necessary, sometimes it's good to delve into the theoretical and occasionally examine the, quote, what ifs. Common sense, or call it common sense, if it is. Right, Tom? Let's argue without being argumentative. Let's disagree without being disagreeable. Let's not play pin the tail on the talk show host. We don't tolerate filibusters here. For callers, we don't tolerate filibusters, soapboxing, hostile takeovers, or cumulative testimony. Right, Jose?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Except for repeat.
Except for repeat. Well, I suppose I kind of waive the rules for Frenchie and Simon sometimes because they always have so much to say, right? Caveat, look out for provocative content on Tall Tales. Tall Tales thrives on disagreement. Tall Tales is an issue-driven interactive talk show that invites audience participation. Usa dos na lenguaje, e fino English and e fino tomorrow loqui ki programaho, ay programata. Guajo y donmizu host san butlon, kasi frihon, san natalik do. Tall Tales is the name, so look out for the tongue-in-cheek aspects of the show and listen for Jose's horn. Sometimes my humor is so subtle and understated that people think I'm being factual, truthful, or literal. And when that's the case, you'll hear Jose honking that horn. That means Bob's just teasing there, guys. Sit back and enjoy Zemi Ikotny, the boxing card, the big halftime show, the 7th inning stretch directly from Wrigley Field, and the home stretch from Churchill Downs. My job is to make the complex understandable and, if possible, interesting. Sometimes we comfort the afflicted. Sometimes we afflict the comfortable. No soapboxes allowed, no filibusters, and no pin the tail on the talk show host either, nor hostile takeovers. Your humble, self-effacing, ever-modest host, that's me. And if you listen a lot, you'll know that I'm not only humble, but extremely proud of my humility. Your humble, self-effacing, ever-modest host is supported by the Tall Tales think tank. That's 4T. To include a foreign policy guru, a constitutional law and organic act expert, that's me too, a research, survey, and statistic bureau, and now a scriptwriter for the 19th floor. The 19th floor and Tony Babauta continue to haunt us here on Tall Tales. They'll never be gone. All right, so that's it. That's the rules of engagement for Tall Tales. Now let's go to Zemi Ikotny. And once again, by way of explanation, Zemi Ikotny, that's my bilingual backwards play on words. Zemi Ikotny translates literally to press the meat. We turn it around to mean meet the press, M-E-E-T, the press. Ours is so much better, though, than the one you'll see on PMSNBC. I don't pretend to be objective. I tell you exactly what I think, and I don't try to camouflage it as objective news reporting. So what I do is I go through the editorial presentations by each of our daily newspapers. I've got my blue pencil here. I mark them up as though I were a English teacher once upon a time, which I was. And having done that, I weigh the two, and the better of the two gets the coveted blue star, with the understanding that the blue star never goes by default. Well, the Daily News has been stepping into an empty boxing ring here for about 6 weeks now, and still can't get a blue star. It appears that the Post editorial department is on strike, but the Daily News still can't crack the code. So we'll start out with today's Daily News editorial. We got a lot of stuff in Zemi Ikotny today. Starting out with today's editorial. Our View, PDN moves to Hulali. Yeah. So there's a 10-story building downtown that everybody still calls the Daily News building or the PDN building, even though it's officially the DNA building. And it's been there for over 50 years. And the Daily News was headquarters in there for over 50 years. They took up a lot of space in the Daily News. They not only had their news and editorial departments on the second or first floor, I can't remember which, and then the presses were down on the first floor. So the whole outfit was in that building. They moved the presses, the printing presses, out to Compadres Mall probably 4 or 5 years ago, and now they're moving the rest of the outfit from the Daily News building to Hulali. And they say the reason is that it's not because they're growing, it's because they're shrinking.
I think it's because it's located on the left side of Agania.
Yeah, they wanted to be over on the left side of the island, right? So they went from 180 employees down to 65. So they had too much space in the Daily News building. They're moving out, and they're moving down to Hulali. I hope that the atmosphere in Hulali leads to a little bit more objective reporting than what we've been treated to so far.
Nope.
No. Okay, now I'm going to go back to Sunday's paper. And Sunday's paper was a Sunday Forum. And this is the question they presented for the Sunday Forum. Sunday Forum, is it time for Guam to have its own constitution? The judiciary of Guam is preparing to celebrate Law Month with various public events and activities with the theme, quote, toward a more perfect union, the Constitution in times of change. As we celebrate the justice system Law Month, is it time for Guam to have its own constitution? Now, I'm going to tell you what they think the answer is, and then I'm going to tell you what the Carl thinks the answer is, and then I'm going to tell you what the right answer is. In other words, what I think. So here's what how the Daily News weighed in. Guam's Law Month celebration are in full gear, and it's time for us to reflect on the role of the legal system in our daily lives and to remember the contribution of the scholars, leaders, and advocates who have guided us on our complex political journey. In partnership with the Law Month Committee, we pose the question to our readers, is it time for Guam to have its own constitution? This question, the subject of many debates and cornerstone of agendas that have formed activist movements and self-determination commissions, is not new. Guam's leaders for decades have attempted the answer of how we can better and more independently govern ourselves as we define our relationship with the United States and the world. Though valiant attempts were made by leaders before him, former Governor Carl T.C. Gutierrez, then chairman of Guam's second constitutional convention in 1977, led a successful mission to Washington. It was then, Gutierrez said, that federal authorization for Guam Constitution was secured. Fed said, yeah, it looks good to us. Despite this nod from the federal government, that draft of a Guam Constitution failed to receive popular support at local polls. No! But it's clear that that unresolved jigsaw puzzle of Guam's political status and current state of American politics will only complicate the question of a Guam Constitution in the long run. The U.S. Supreme Court's recent ruling to deny a U.S. citizen born on American soil the same rights and benefits offered to our neighbors in the Northern Marianas, simply. Now, whenever you see that word simply, your antenna should go up. Somebody's trying to slide one by you. Simply because she lived on Guam. That's not the simple, there's not a simple answer there at all. Signals that it's time for us, leaders and citizens, to reignite our mission to clearly define our relationship with the United States. This is a subject that must be furthered by discourse and input from Guamanians from all sectors, industries, interests, and walks of life. We have leaders still among us whose institutional knowledge we must call upon for guidance. Well, I'm ready. Now is the time for action. So that's the Daily News weighing in on it. Okay, and yesterday, the Daily News ran a piece submitted in response to this invitation from former Governor Carl Gutierrez. And he says, of course, Guam should have its own constitution. And he goes on to say, whether every member of Congress knew it or not, philosophically, that was the intent from the moment the Organic Act was signed into law in 1950. The notion was that our island should become increasingly self-governing, first by weaning the people away from post-war naval government and into civil government with limited autonomy. This included a governor appointed by the U.S. president, a court system, elected lawmakers, and free and fair elections. Now, I got to stop here for a minute. I'm going to use a word that some people think that should cause me to wash my mouth out with soap. The word is tutelage. So the United States in 1950 thought, the mother country thought that the folks out here in the colony needed to undergo some tutelage to move them from where they were, living under martial law since 1898, and before that something probably even more, even less democratic under the Spanish, to move from martial law to a democratically organized government. So in the beginning, the United States president appointed the governor, and subject to the confirmation of the Congress. President appointed the secretary of Guam, who was the functional equivalent of the lieutenant governor, once again subject to confirmation by Congress. We had a district court, a United States district court, but we call it the District Court of Guam because it had local as well as federal jurisdiction in those days. It was the only court. The judge was appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. There were no local courts, but the Organic Act said that the legislature, which was the only local governmental body, elected legislature, could create a court system and transfer non-federal jurisdiction from the district court to the local courts. And that's what happened. So way back in probably 1951, the island court system was created. Local judges appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature. That lasted up until the Mink, and no jury trials, by the way. That lasted up until the Mink amendments to the 1968 Elected Governor Act, which caused the enactment of something called the Court Reorganization Act, where the Island Court was renamed the Superior Court, complete with jury trials, etc. We took a crack at having our own Supreme Court. The Organic Act did not allow for it. The United States Supreme Court said, you guys can't have your own Supreme Court. Congress later on gave us the ability to have a Supreme Court, in other words, allowed a Supreme Court, which was created by local law, but it resulted in a gigantic fight between the Superior Court and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, although called supreme, was actually inferior when it came to fiscal operations, etc., to the Superior Court. A large lobbying effort was undertaken by the Superior Court, big enough to pay Jack Abramoff about $9 million to protect the prerogatives of the Superior Court. The Jack Abramoff. And finally, however, Congress changed the Organic Act, and instead of allowing us to have a Supreme Court, created a Supreme Court, which is truly supreme now. So now we have an elected governor since 1970. We have an elected legislature since the get-go, and a Supreme Court appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature, and the same with our Superior Court. So now we have a completely local government. Nobody from Washington appoints anybody anymore. Carl's letter goes on to say, following nearly 18 years of leadership under civilian governors appointed by U.S. President, Congress in 1968 passed the Elected Governor Act, enabling the popular election of the governor for the first time in our island's history. In 1969, the people elected delegates to the island's first constitutional convention. While that convention was not federally authorized, the effort was noble and a prudent step towards self-government. That convention, however, sought to revise the Organic Act rather than write an entirely new charter. Although I prefer a full-blown constitution to an indenture whose autonomy is vested 8,000 miles away in Congress, here comes a really important part of this, Carl's letter, so pay special attention here. He says, although I prefer a full-blown constitution to an indenture whose autonomy is vested 8,000 miles away in Congress, Organic Act patriation remains a viable option spelled out succinctly in a bill proffered by then Senator Robert Klitzkie. Yeah, that's me. You know how I don't like to talk about myself on the show. I'm doing my Rush Limbaugh imitation there. His patriation measures sought to wrest control of the Organic Act from Congress and hand over amending power to the Guam legislature. This would be a good starting point to modernize parts of the Organic Act in ways that lift the congressional barrier to efficient self-government. Patriation would essentially form the basis of an autonomous constitution for Guam. Good call, Governor. But wait, Guam already has a constitution. It's a promise that's been hovering in suspended animation for nearly 45 years. In October 1976, Congress enacted Public Law 94-584, authorizing Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands to draft their own constitutions. By December of that year, the late Frank Bloss introduced a bill which became Public Law 13-202, calling for a con and the election of delegates. I was a senator then, Carl says, and I ran for and was elected president of the island's second, but first federally authorized constitutional convention. My fellow delegates and I drafted an entirely new contract to serve the people of Guam. It was approved by Congress, and I proudly flew to the White House sporting sideburns and bell bottoms, and a full head of hair, by the way, folks, and was accompanied by Governor Ricky Berdallo and Delegate Antonio Wampet to receive the signed approval from President Jimmy Carter. Unfortunately, our federally approved Constitution was soundly rejected by Guam voters, largely based on unfounded fears that Guam would lose its negotiating power for future political status change. I blame it on the separatists, such as they were in those days. How can we have a constitution when we haven't decided our political status? We need self-determination, which, of course, is actually translated to mean independence. I believe the perceived problem then as now is embedded in the preamble, quote, assuming the responsibility of self-government within the political union of the United States of America. Well, I'll get to self-government a little later on, but we're just about there. Yet, Congress is crystal clear that as a U.S. territory, Guam must declare its loyalty to America within the text of any proposed constitution. Even so, our draft charter takes local command of our government by rewriting 95% of the Organic Act, and those parts of the Organic Act that dealt with federal relations were appended to the draft constitution for further discussion. All right, we're going to take a short break here. I notice I've got Repeat who wants to chime in here. I'm going to finish Carl's piece, Repeat. Before I dive into my own, I'll put you on the line, okay?
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, going back to the governor's piece here. When I became governor, I proposed to the White House a Federal Review Commission initiative that would prevent the U.S. government's misguided one-size-fits-all approach to governance, territories, and possessions. Well, actually, we don't have a one-size. That's the real strength of Downs versus Bidwell, that we have, for the right reason or the wrong reason or no reason at all, the Congress has basically tailored governmental structures to fit each of the islands. Okay, he goes on to say, by that time, Commonwealth efforts had failed, and I was trying to think outside the box, if you will, and find at least an interim solution to the unfortunate irony we territories face. Being part of a representative democracy, yet having no meaningful representation to speak of it in Congress, the very body with ultimate control over our affairs. The proposal was to have 3 commissioners appointed by the U.S. President, with one being recommended by the governor. This commission would serve as a clearinghouse to determine the local impact of legislation proposed by Congress and ensure that Guam's concerns get the congressional vetting they deserve. Although President Bill Clinton indicated his approval for this Federal Review Commission, and by the way, President Bill Clinton and his child bride, Hilarious, actually came out here at the invitation of Carl Gutierrez. Yeah, I think they were buds. Clinton indicated his approval for this Federal Review Commission. His second term ended before mine did, and we ran out of time to make it a reality. So here we stand, 4.5 decades after obtaining federal approval of our draft constitution, and we're still asking, should Guam have its own constitution? My position is that instead of starting from scratch, we dust off that constitution, and I ask the legislature to call for a ratification of that document. Once ratified, we, Guam, would be able to update any provisions rendered obsolete through the passage of time and law, such as our amended court and educational systems. And the governor can still pursue the establishment of the proposed commission to help close policy gaps in the future. But of course, what Carl, I'm sure he's well aware of this, but he doesn't mention it in his column, and I don't either. Folks who ought to be interested in this are not, because they'd much rather just bitch. It's a whole lot more satisfying. That draft constitution remains a testament to Guam's grasp of modern Republican government. And lest anyone fails to recognize how significant it is that the Constitution that came from our 1997 CONCON received congressional and presidential approval, consider that the U.S. Virgin Islands, whose political status is nearly identical to Guam's, has tried and failed 5 times to get the approvals we secured over 40 years ago. They held 5 constitutional conventions between 1964 and 2010, none of which achieved an approved constitution. Guam's did on our first try, and as I've always maintained, that approval still stands. Our 1977 draft constitution is a living document. Hey, I like this right up until I heard that. I don't care. We don't need no constitution that's a living document.
Nope.
And the people should be given a second chance to review it for ratification through the lens of fact and history. In my opinion, a constitution of Guam would leapfrog us forward by strengthening local autonomy and slackening the centralized authority of the Organic Act, while bringing Guam into closer political union with the United States, whose constitution already respects and honors the constitutions of an individual states and territories. And by the way, in order for a territory to be admitted as a state, it's got to have a constitution that's acceptable to Congress. An active federal commission would go a long way to underscore the sacredness of territorial prerogatives in light of the long enshrined rights of American states. Now, a commission like the one that Governor Gutierrez suggests is already in place. It's the 903 Commission for the Northern Mariana Islands, which is part of the covenant that they negotiated. So this is a pretty nice piece of work by Carl Gutierrez, And I know he's going to say things more than once, but you got to pay attention the first time because it's repeat.
Off a day, Uncle Bob. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, repeat.
Yeah, you mentioned Abramoff. There is a movement for campaign reform, and guess who's one of the major pushers of that?
Well, he should know where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. He's a Saul turned Paul.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting thing about Jack Abramoff. He got his start in Saipan. He got his first high-paying gig protecting the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas from the Congress's desires to apply American labor law and tariff law to the Northern Marianas, and he knocked down a pretty good-sized fee. And he knocked down a pretty good-sized fee here, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason why I called is listening to all this conversation in the public about the Constitution and Guam's political development. The way I understand it as a student of Guam history was that the intent for the natives by the United States was to educate, professionalize, then autonomize, right?
Uh-huh.
So you first start with educating the natives and then professionalize them, and at the same time, autonomy should have been increased all along the way, and we've seen that. We've seen small steps. Now, it's our fault that we didn't ratify the Constitution. That is something I think that has very huge utility for us, but because, like you said, the folks that were concerned with how that would look to the UN, it would have taken us off of the non-self-governing territories list, which, there is some credence to that, because that's what happened to other areas that have their own constitution. But that notwithstanding would still not have an effect on the political self-determination movement as a whole. Now, when it comes to being a state, you and I are on the same page that Guam will never become a state because of the political climate and just the unwillingness to accept more states, I think, that the states have right now. But I have another observation, too, that I speak about, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, but aside from the fact that these territories, the 5 territories were, well, not including American Samoa, were obtained, unexpectedly as spoils of war. So the 4 territories, right? But then Cuba and Philippines went independent. The other things that the latest territories have in common that Guam and American Samoa and the Virgin Islands and Sinai now don't have is that those territories on their path to statehood or on their way to statehood were replaced by a settler government that were of the same kind of background and history of the rest of the states. And so I've always felt that because the territories don't have a settler government that overthrew the natives and are more of the same tradition, the Anglo-Saxon tradition, that is a barrier whether we want to, admit it or not. What do you think?
Yeah, and scrape the paint and varnish off it. I think I don't know that anyone ever consciously voiced this, but there weren't enough white people in Hawaii to make Hawaii a state until, after, 50 years or so of territorial existence. And of course, it was a lot easier in Alaska because there just weren't that many people there in the first place. But as the white settlers moved across the continent, the territories became states. I want to go back to something you mentioned about the idea about educating the local folks, the natives.
Education, professionalized, and autonomized.
I have somewhere in my papers here that I can never find a copy of Section 9A of the Organic Act as enacted. And I can paraphrase it. It said something along the lines of that the legislature should develop a merit system and that qualified people of Guamanian ancestry should be given priority for jobs they were qualified for and for training. Now, that has to be translated a little bit. In 1950, Guamanian was a synonym for Chamorro. We didn't start calling people who weren't Chamorro Guamanians until about 15 or 20 years ago. Back before the beginning of this century, Guamanian meant Chamorro. So that was Congress's idea, that will give Guamanians preference, create this government, give them preference for jobs and for training. And as time went on, you know, as I described, we went from a government that was 2/3 non-local to a government that's 100% local now.
Right, and you know, I don't know if you ever heard me say this too before, but when I went to the University of Washington, which has I believe, the premier Native American or Indian law program.
I think that's the University of New Mexico. Pete, I think that's the University of New Mexico. Sorry, but go on.
Well, UW we like to claim it. There's no way to actually qualify that, but we like to claim it. But anyways, be that as it may, I noticed a lot of parallels between how Department of Interior dealt with the locals on Guam. So, you know, to me, they just, you know, used the same playbook that they used with the native tribes in America and applied a lot of those principles to the territories out here. In other words, that provision in the Organic Act is very similar to the provisions that, you know, tribes have where they can give preferential hiring preferences to tribe members. Likewise, something that the tribes have that we don't have is, and we're going to start seeing that because it wasn't such a problem before, but now we're seeing it more of a problem, is adoptions, right?
Oh yeah.
So in America, a lot of Native American children were being adopted by Caucasians, and the native tribes realized that this was harmful to their total existence. So there's a law now, a federal law, that the tribe has right of first refusal when it comes to adoptions of native children. I don't know that is something that's going to be necessary on Guam, but adoptions on Guam were a lot more informal and they were more by family. Now we're starting to see more formal adoptions and more adoptions being done by non-Chamorros.
Going back to what you said about Indian tribes being able to have hiring preferences, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case. Is somebody whose name begins with M versus the United States, where the Supreme Court.
Makari?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That legitimize that process. Well, whether or not those things are within reach for Guam is an interesting question. But if we don't start working towards understanding those questions, we'll never get anywhere. And as I said a little earlier, instead of really pursuing these things that we could pursue, an awful lot of people, primarily the separatists, would much rather just sit around and bitch.
Well, here's another way to think of it too, though. That the Native Americans are a sovereign. And right now, the government of Guam is an instrumentality of federal statute. So until we have our own constitution, we cannot even begin to call ourselves a sovereign.
We can't even pretend to be sovereign. And there's a really interesting case, the Rastaman case. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Ninth Circuit Guam attempted to advance the proposition that the Bill of Rights in the Organic Act, as opposed to the Mink Bill of Rights, are the same thing as a state constitution. So the Supreme Court's interpretation of those is like a state Supreme Court interpreting a state constitution and entitled to deference on the part of federal courts. The Ninth Circuit said, poppycock, you don't have a constitution. You got a federal statute. We can interpret it better than you guys can. And
that's why we have the double jeopardy issue here on Guam, right?
Well,
there is no double jeopardy.
We'll be stuck with that until we have our own constitution. And as far as the Indians, Native American tribes are concerned, I oftentimes bring this up. Article 8, Section 3, Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 3, Congress has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So the Indian tribes stand on at least the same footing as the several states and probably with foreign nations. They're like separate, subordinate, independent countries, which, of course, Guam won't be.
Right. Well, thanks for letting me chime in, Uncle Bob.
Always good to talk to you, Repeat. Talk to you later. Let's take a short break.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Okay, continuing on here, Stella and Zemi Kotny, I'm going to pay a little attention to my submission to the Sunday Forum, which ran in this morning's hard copy, yesterday's online copy, and it's entitled, It's Time for Us to Enact Our Constitution. And I picked up on the same format that as the solicitation, which was toward a more perfect union, the Constitution in a time of change. Is it time for us to have our own Constitution? So I start out with the first item, toward a more perfect union. And it goes like this. Separatists, that is those who contemplate a Guam independent of the United States, would shout, quote, statehood for Puerto Rico and independence for Guam and the other islands, alleging that Guam isn't now and never has been part of the Union. How can you have a more perfect union, right? Guam is not and never has been part of the Union. Pointing to the U.S. Supreme Court case called Downs versus Bidwell, which said that although Puerto Rico is under U.S. sovereignty, it's not part of the United States. By implication, that ruling applies to Guam and the other islands. Thus, semantic construction suggests that a union cannot become more perfect until it brings outliers like Puerto Rico or Guam within the union or expels them as an anomalous imperfection. So if you want to have a more perfect union, okay, make Puerto Rico a state, send the Virgin Islands, Samoa, Northern Marianas packing because they can't become states, and it's not your union is never going to become more perfect with anomalous elements inside it. Okay, so that's the point that I make in the beginning, and then go on to say, fortunately for us, because of Rather, in spite of Downs, our island is and can remain a part of the American political family. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. The insular cases, Downs versus Bidwell, are our best friends. And then I go to the next item, the Constitution in a time of change. Given that Guam is a very small island in a very big bellicose world, being a nation alone doesn't augur well for the folks who live here. The Constitution is our salvation, but it's not what the Constitution does for us. It's what the Constitution doesn't do. From Downs versus Bidwell, decided in 1901, to the United States versus Viella Madero, decided this month, the Supreme Court has held that the Constitution does not apply in the territories ex proprio vigere, meaning by its own force. Parts of the Constitution that were held inapplicable to the island by the other insular cases, such as birthright citizenship of the Bill of Rights and the Bill of Rights, are now applicable in Guam. Well, the protections of the Constitutions are applicable because of Downs. Congress lets us keep income taxes paid here plus Section 30 money. It doesn't apply U.S. customs duties. That's why we're a free port. And allows us to do our own customs inspections. Allows us to collect our own territory, our own duties in the form of a use tax. Tolerates an important tax shelter administered by GITA, and provides us a voice in the Congress. All of those things are because of the insular cases. So when you hear somebody like Neil Weir saying, Supreme Court's got to overrule the insular cases, it would be the worst possible thing that could happen to Guam.
Nope.
Going on, constitutions often embody deontological precepts that framers desire to serve as bulwarks against impulsive change that is inimical to the values upon which a country is founded. We can hope that in this time of change, the Constitution continues to serve that purpose. Our own Constitution. Of course, it's time for us to enact our Constitution. We've had the opportunity to enact a Constitution since 1977 and our own tax code since 1986. Since the erection of a Supreme Court, which is de jure supreme, the lack of a locally developed tax code and a Constitution are the last necessary governmental additions to complete home rule. Now, let me amplify that a little bit. A little earlier in the show, I went through the genesis of our government, where we started out with an elected legislature. Now we wind up with an elected governor, our own Supreme Court, an elected legislature, an elected delegate to Washington, and a complete control over everything that goes on in this island, except for the tax law, which we can change if we so desire, and except for the fact that we're still governed by a federal statute because we haven't adopted our own Constitution. Those are the last two items that we need to have complete home rule. By enacting our Constitution, we can not only complete the home rule package, but also establish that bulwark against impulsive change that is inimical to the values upon which our country was founded, and we can enhance the blessings accruing to us as members of the American political family. Now, I know that won't sit very well with the separatists at all, which is probably why it was so much fun to write. So if you want to chime in on that, this would be a really good time. Or maybe right after the big halftime show, you'll have a chance to think about it a little bit. Get in after the big halftime show. So we'll be back in about 7 minutes.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Evacuations in Mariupol. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. Civilians taking refuge at a steel plant in the port city of Mariupol, Ukraine for almost 2 months began to be evacuated over the weekend. Ukraine President Zelensky stating in his nightly address Sunday that more than 100 women and children have been safely evacuated from the plant. He said that there was not a single day that the Ukrainian government did not try to find a way to save their people. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other congressional members making an unannounced visit to Kyiv over the weekend to meet with Ukraine's President Zelensky. The congressional delegation reaffirming its support for Ukraine. President Biden calling on Congress for quick passage of a $33 billion aid package for Ukraine. GOP Texas Congressman Michael McCall telling ABC's This Week, Sunday, that he has high hopes for the package.
Every day we don't send them more weapons is a day where more people will be killed and a day where they could lose this war. I think they can win it, but we have to give them the tools to do it.
First Lady Jill Biden plans to meet with Ukrainian refugees in Europe this week. Authorities in Alabama still searching for a murder suspect who escaped while in custody, along with a jail deputy.
$10,000 for information on a missing Alabama inmate and his presumed hostage. Casey White disappeared Friday while awaiting trial for capital murder in Lauderdale County. Also missing is corrections officer Vicky White, no relation to the inmate. She said she was transporting the prisoner from jail to the county courthouse.
Fox's Jackie Ibanez. Investigators unsure whether the guard may have assisted in the escape or was forced to do so. President Biden praising the late former Vice President Walter Fritz Mondale at his memorial service in Minneapolis Sunday.
Just imagine what our nation could achieve. We followed Fritz's example of honor, decency, integrity.
Sound courtesy of the University of Minnesota. America is listening to Fox News.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate with cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Brothers put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The New York City Police Department coming up with new ways to deal with the state's crime wave.
The NYPD will be surging resources to the most dangerous areas of the city during the most dangerous time of night. The chief of department, Ken Corey, says half of all shootings happen during a 5-hour window between 9 at night and 2 in the morning. The new summer plan includes more cops on patrol at night. They're moving 350 neighborhood coordinating officers onto evening patrol. 3 cars on the midnight shift will start 3 hours earlier, and they're also using field intelligence officers.
Fox's Nate Foy, a female student at a Christian college in Tennessee, saying the school has retaliated against her after she reported an on-campus rape.
In her complaint, Mara Luke says Visible Music College disciplined her after she reported being choked and raped by a male classmate. She says the school refused to remove her attacker from her classes and accused her of violating a school rule against premarital sex with a different student, her ex-boyfriend. Luke denies this. Nonetheless, she claims the college threatened to expel her if she did not sign a confession and finish the year online. The school's president says he has not seen Luke's complaint, but says the school will cooperate with any investigation of the allegations made in the complaint. Jessica Stone, Fox News.
The Bad Guys continuing its reign atop the weekend's box office.
The DreamWorks animated heist movie was #1 in North American theaters for the second straight weekend. The Bad Guys raking in more than $16 million in ticket sales. Another animated film, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, held strong with $11.4 million in sales. Good enough for second place. Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore, coming in third, selling $8.3 million worth of tickets this weekend. Kathleen Maloney, Fox News.
I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
Hafa Day. I'm the owner of Guam's largest tourist attraction group. The pandemic's been very tough for all of us, and particularly for my team members. So I'm really appreciative and grateful for the PUA assistance to our team members, and more recently, the SVOG federal grant that allowed us to reopen these facilities and re-employ everyone at a critical time when PUA ended. From myself and my team, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the federal funds that allowed us to reopen.
The federal fund you provide saved many, many jobs. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We employ about 35 technicians for our shows. Thank you for the federal funds. It kept us going.
Thank you for helping with the federal funds.
Thank you for the federal funds.
Thank you for helping to save our jobs.
Thank
you for the federal funds.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Subway's Eat Fresh Refresh does it again, bringing back a classic fan favorite on the menu. The roast beef returns. And not just any roast beef, it's choice Angus roast beef, flavorful and satisfying on its own, or layered with oven-roasted turkey and Black Forest ham in the Subway Club. Whether you're a choice Angus roast beef purist or like the variety of the Subway Club, both come piled high on hearty multi-grain bread with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Get your fill of the new roast beef at Subway. Eat fresh.
So here we are, big halftime show again, another success. The marching band, the drill team, the synchronized card section up in the stands. And since it's Monday, it is time for Hope Cristobal's screen test. If you haven't seen it before, it's worth watching. If you have seen it before, it's worth remembering. Now, others see Hope a little differently than I do, including Hope herself. There was an article that ran in the Pacific Island Times probably just a couple days ago about what a wonderful person Hope is and how she sticks up for herself. So here's how it goes. It's not about me. It just can't be just about me, Nobel Prize nominee Hope Cristobal said, dedicating her nomination to her home island. She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize by Lisa Natividad at the university, another separatist. Hope goes on to say, this nomination really highlights Guam and our people. The former Guam senator is in the company of Pope Francis, Belarusian opposition leaders Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and the next one I think is really quite appropriate, Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg.
How dare you!
I think Hope and Greta kind of would fit into the same Mold, yeah.
How dare you?
According to the Nobel Committee, there are 343 candidates for the Nobel Prize in 2022. 343 of them. Out of which 251 are individuals and 92 are organizations. The Oslo-based committee will announce this year's laureate in October. Last year, the prize went to two journalists fighting for freedom of speech, Maria Ressa of the Philippines and Russia's Dmitry Muratov. Quote, "You can't forge peace as an individual. Peace must be forged by many. The formula has to come out," Cristobal said. "You can be at peace with yourself, but what does that mean? That means little, if anything." I get a kick out of Hope talking about peace. Cristobal inspires and is inspired by the indigenous women in the Pacific Island region. To me, the nomination is a product of all this activity, this energy that women have. Women have so much energy, they can't even beat men in rugby. "I just happened to be there at these events," said the former senator, who is a representative of the Guam Coalition for Peace and Justice, which advocates for Chamorro rights at the United Nations. Cristobal, who served as a senator from 1995 to 1997, it only took the folks one term to catch on, was a sponsor of local statutes that created the Commission on Decolonization and established the Chamorro Registry. While she has held many titles through the years, Cristobal sees herself first and foremost as a nurturer. And then we go on to the next part here. As an activist, Cristobal is not afraid of confrontation. Now fasten your seatbelt, folks, because here comes a whopper. As an activist, Cristobal is not afraid of confrontation. At the Black Lives Matter rally in Hagatna last year, there were counter-protesters harassing us.
Is that really in there?
Yes.
You're kidding me.
No. As an activist, Cristobal is not afraid of confrontation. Quote, "At the Black Lives Matter rally in Hagatna last year, there were counter-protesters harassing us," she said. "I wasn't afraid to back down. There are always people out there who will challenge you. These are just part of the journey."
Wait, I think the Disinformation Governance Board is on the line.
Listen, you better get this on Twitter quick before Elon Musk takes over, right? Okay, so that lays a nice foundation for what we're going to do here. I'm going to read it one more time. At the Black Lives Matter rally in Hagatna last year, there were counter-protesters harassing us. I wasn't afraid to back down. Now watch these counter-protesters harassing Hope.
Colonizer! You're nothing but a white colonizer. That's who you are. Colonization is the same thing as slow murder. You're a murderer. That's who you are.
We need to just do different. We need to do that.
Get off my island.
Sir, you need to go. You can't be policing people here and telling people how to protest or what to protest for. You need to go. You need to go. I'm against this. Yeah. That's cool, but you cannot be policing people and telling them how to protest and what to advocate for. She has a right to yell.
I'm an indigenous Chamorro. I have more rights here than you are. You came here because of the structures of colonialism, asshole. Tayo mamalaw how sige Joseph Tano. Itaw taw tano how. Waho bini taw taw tano. Waho bini madahoga. Waho na short na kay gitu bini. Hago taza na short mo bini. You need to leave.
You need to go.
Please.
You need to get out of here.
Please pause this.
Get out of here.
Please, this is not your place.
When I get a chance, go.
Please, thank you. Thank you, partner. Please, please.
No, you came up and
What happened, ma'am?
well, he confronted me.
What did he
He's
say?
telling me I shouldn't be here. I support Black Lives Matter. It's part of the colonialistic systemic racism. And I came here to support these people. He's a white man that has come here. And he continues the legacy of colonialism. He continues to fight people, individuals, my goodness. I'm a former senator. I authored the Commission on Decolonization. Karohu. Hi, Mamalo.
We're proud of you, Auntie.
Si Diyos mangasi.
So there you go, man. That counter protester. Whoa.
That's man, was she brave?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. If I'd have been there, I'd have stepped in and laughed.
You know, the irony of this all was that Paul Zerzan was down there to protest with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And I said on the chat, you know, he's not perfect, but he wasn't counter protesting Black Lives Matter or them. He didn't appreciate the co-opting of the protests, and that's what he was there for. Whether you agree with him or not, he wasn't a counter protest to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, but you know what his protest really consisted of? He was a white man. Yeah. And she could see that, no matter how hard he tried.
Careful how they throw those things around because calling people white.
Yeah, so once again, in case you're a little bit at a loss as to what you just watched, I'll read Hope's account of it again. At the Black Lives Matter rally in Hagatna last year, there were counter-protesters harassing us. I wasn't afraid to back down. There are always people out there who will challenge you. These are just part of the journey. I went to Black Lives Matter rally because I want to show my support for oppressed people. I will follow the news, and I'm aware that innocent people are being killed just because of the color of their skin. Now, here's a good one. We need to see each other beyond the color of our skin. Yeah, so that's Hope, and we're going to run this again next Monday. Hope is the face and voice of the Chamorro separatist movement. She is the chairperson of the Chamorro Language Commission. She authored the Chamorro Independence Commission bill, which starts right out with a gigantic lie, which I've pointed out more than one occasion. So, you know, you got to give her credit, man. When those counter protesters, I mean, she just stood right up to them, right?
Well, he was such a big guy. I guess he counted as two. So
Oh
that's
yeah, and Paul is so aggressive. You know, it's kind of like the local equivalent of Jesse Ventura.
Excuse me, ma'am. I don't know if you should be here doing that. Get out of here, you colonizer! I'm just asking you a question.
And here is a sentence that she also laid before us. I follow the news, and I'm aware that innocent people are getting killed just because of the color of their skin. We need to see each other beyond the color of our skin. Immortal words from Hope Cristobal. Okay, I got a phone call here. I suppose it's probably Hope calling in to tell us how scared she was during the confrontation. It's none other than Another Joe. Good afternoon, Another Joe.
Thank you, Bob. You know, the Frenchies called in and said that certain leaders, like sitting senators, are possibly communists or socialists. And I'm kind of curious if these leaders, sliding leaders, should be given a chance to confirm whether they are or not identified or affiliated with some communists or socialists on Guam, because why would they be afraid to reveal if they feel that they are communists or socialists?
Well, if you've been following the Black Lives Matter cultural Marxism, they don't have to do any identification. They've pretty much came out and told us that. Patrisse Cullors is on tape or recorded as saying, I studied Marxist doctrine. And they make no bones about being Marxist. On their website, they said that they wanted to do away with the nuclear family and some other Marxist type ideas. So they're Marxist through and through. And I keep making the point that the local separatists might not know that they're doing it, but they're using the cultural Marxism tropes to move their agenda forward. The presentism, the condemning people who were around 100 years ago because they don't live up to today's manners and morals and ethics, and all of the gaslighting that goes with cultural Marxism. So the insidious thing about cultural Marxism is that it's not like a club where you have a membership card or something like that. It's an approach to something very similar to brainwashing, where people who buy into it don't realize that they're being had. And they think that they're the normal ones and everybody else is a little bit off key.
Well, we better point out that they're actually supporting this ideology, and people might not want to be on. That's going to be on the wrong side there, especially if you think you're a Christian. Anyway, Bob, thanks for your time. I'll just keep listening.
All right. Nice talking to you. Well, as far as Black Lives Matter is concerned, you'll remember that we had a group called White Coats for Black Lives Matter down at at Skinner Plaza, kneeling to support Black Lives Matter. That was Tom Shea and the governor's daughter, the one that's a doctor.
Mariana,
yeah.
Oh, the hyphenated.
Hun, yeah.
Cook-hun.
Yeah, Cook-hun. And maybe you could have forgiven him then when it wasn't widely known what a scam Black Lives Matter is. But now everybody knows, and I haven't heard them come forward and say, "Yeah, we made a mistake with that." They're just kind of hoping people forget, I guess. Okay, let's go next to the card. So long, Demi and Cutney today, and. On the card, I've, of course, got Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. Today was a classic example. You saw the facts. You saw what happened. The narrative is that there were counter-protesters that were harassing Hope Cristobal, and she had to stand up to them. Now, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, if you spent the time, you could find people who were at that rally who would say that's exactly what happened. Yeah, well, look at this video. I don't care about videos. The narrative versus the facts. The narrative versus the truth. So we've got that. We've got Jeep Throat revisited. The Jerry Kitchen matter. We've got Josh Walsh versus the narrative. Josh Walsh has a key role in Rugby Boy. And other than the boy who was pretending to be a girl, Josh Walsh is the only man in the whole lash-up. Then we've got the Post versus the Insular cases, Calamity Jane versus the Unborn, Pete Scrow versus, if you'll pardon the expression, Take, the Ethics Commission versus the Open Government Law. So let's start out with, as I usually do, I'm going to start out with something that isn't even on the card. This is the program for the State of the Island address that Chief Justice Philip Carboliu gave on Thursday. Very nice publication, lots of data, colored pages, etc. And the chief gave a nice speech, kind of some historical background over the court and how the court has changed in the last 20 years, and it really has. going back to the time when the Superior Court was supreme, and the Supreme Court was just sort of an interesting footnote, but really didn't have any power. The Jack Abramoff days, etc. They've come a long way to being a unified judiciary and handling the judicial business pretty well. He went into that, talked about how the Supreme Court, how the courts got through the pandemic, and the improvements that they have online for the future. And then the chief said, and he praised the employees of the court time and time again, over and over again. And then he stopped and he said, we're working on a study, a salary study to improve the salary, the pay of all the court employees. And then he said, I know I'm going to hear from Senator Klitzkie about that on Monday, but we're going to do it.
That was in it.
That's what he said. Yeah. So, anytime a tailgater makes reference to the show, I hate to disappoint him. So, yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit, Chief. You're in a better position to determine whether or not the salaries at the Superior Court need to be looked at. The only caveat I give you is this. There are a lot of people that are really in bad shape because they didn't have any salary at all for a long, long time. And to give the favored few, those that work for the government, salary increases when other folks are still, are still trying to get back on their feet, that's a tall order, Chief. But so be it. Okay. Then we go to Jeep Throat. As you were, let me go through the Public Law 36-34 part of the agenda. But in doing that, I ran across something that's really interesting. This is not about the open government law. This is a help wanted ad from Norwegian Cruise Line. On-the-spot interviews. Curious about working on a cruise ship? We invite you to come meet our shipboard recruiters who will conduct interviews and share information about the latest crew opportunities on board MS Pride of America at the Westin on Monday today and Wednesday, May 18th. It's in the paper. It'll be in the paper again. If I were 23 instead of 83, Jose, and basically unencumbered, I'd be there with bells on. I know most people haven't had the opportunity to be on a cruise ship, but it is really an experience. Of course, it's different to work than to be a passenger, but those cruise ships go everywhere. You get to go to exotic places. The ships are nice in themselves. If you have any spirit of adventure whatsoever out there, young folks, get down there and take these interviews. Not that I want to get rid of you. You'll have to watch Tall Tales on YouTube on your phones or something like that. But what an opportunity for young folks nowadays. Okay, and then the Commission on Decolonization, of course, violated the law. They've got old business and new business, and they're in with nothing, no description whatsoever. So, of course, I don't think the Commission on Decolonization has to obey the open government law because they really want to be independent. And when they're independent, they won't have to horse around with silly things like the open government law. Government does what it wants to do, and that's enough. Okay, next I've got Jeep Throat Revisited. This is something that Troy ran. Guam Police Department Officer Chris Champion. Chris Champion is the one who responded when the driver of the red Jeep tried to turn Jerry Kitchen into a drive-through, if you recall that. Is again the subject of controversy involving alleged misconduct. He and another police officer are named in an April 1 decision and order from Judge Vern Paris that suppressed the admission of evidence in a case involving drugs and illegal firearm. The judge suppressed the evidence obtained from a January 2, 2020 car search following testimonies by officers Chris Champion and Benjamin Cruz. The pair interviewed the defendant in the case, Benny Nauta Jr., following a traffic stop for a defective license plate that day that led to a search of Nauta's car. That search led to Nauta's arrest after police found a revolver and a meth pipe with suspected meth residue in it. Nauta moved to throw out the evidence and thus the charges, telling the court he twice denied the officers the request to search his car. The court, quote, the court, however, is unable to ascertain whether defendant actually gave informed and voluntary consent to a search of the vehicle. Judge Paris wrote in his decision and order, both Officer Cruz and Officer Champion testified that the defendant objected at first to request the search of the truck. Now, turn on the Law and Order notebooks here for a minute, Jose. We all know that we have a Fourth Amendment, and the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. So ordinarily, the cops need a search warrant if they're going to search you or your vehicle or your house. But like everything else, there are all of the exceptions that lawyers bring to the process. Now, although the cops can't force a search upon you, except in certain circumstances, the person that is encountering the cop can consent to the search. And if it's a knowing and voluntary consent, it's a good search. So that's what this case is about. Judge Paris says both Cruz and Champion testified the defendant objected at first to the request to search the truck. Well, if he objected, then you can't search. And when there's an illegal search, then whatever is found in the illegal search, that evidence is suppressed. It can't be used in the trial against the person who owned that property. And if the property leads to other evidence or even to a confession, then we're dealing with the fruit of the poisonous tree. About an hour, then we pick up with some dialogue here, or some items out of the decision. Defendant testified that Officer Champion asked him to search his vehicle, to which defendant again responded no. Paris wrote, defendant testified that after Officer Champion asked defendant a second time, he told him that if he let him search the vehicle that he would not be arrested and that he would be able to be picked up and go home. Defendant testified that's why he agreed to let Officer Champion search the vehicle. Defendant testified he was hesitant at first because he did not want to agree, but said yes after Officer Champion said, "You just gotta trust me." Defendant testified that Officer Champion asked him 3 to 4 times to search the vehicle. Now, here's the interesting part. 2 police officers, under separate testimony before the court, pointed at each other on the accusation one or both of them caused an illegal search of Nauta's vehicle. He did it. The officers gave conflicting testimony as to how defendant subsequently changed his mind and consented to a search. Cruz testified the defendant did not change his mind until he spoke with Champion. And Champion testified the defendant changed his mind after further speaking with Cruz. I wonder if these guys can dance. If Nauta's version of the event is true, then it was Champion who illegally manipulated consent of the vehicle search. Defendant testified he objected to the search and only consented after Champion promised him he would not get in trouble or arrested if he consented to the search. Not only does defendant's testimony conflict with the officers, but the officers' testimonies conflict with each other. It's bad enough if they conflict with the defendant. Accordingly, the government has not proven voluntary consent by a preponderance of the evidence, and any evidence seized from the defendant's truck must be suppressed. So, and then Troy goes on to say, this decision and order now raises questions about testimony these two officers may have made in the past, and certainly will raise doubts on any testimony they give in the future. An attorney commented on condition of anonymity. That wasn't me. Champion was the subject of a police investigation last year regarding his conduct in the matter of the red Jeep that crashed into Jerry Kitchen. The former member of the now disgraced Mandania Task Force was the responding officer on the scene, which involved a well-connected police department officer whose father is under criminal indictment on allegations he abused the power in law enforcement. Yeah. Okay. So, of course, we remember the Jerry Kitchen incident. And I suspect that if we were to ask the chief of police, Steve Ignacio, Steve, did your two cops impeach one another's testimony? The chief would say, I'm sure there was no impeachment from the get-go there. All right, next item on the card. Wait a minute, I got a caller here. I better take the caller. And it's time for the seventh inning stretch. We're going to go to the the seventh inning stretch. Come back to Frenchie on Marxist on Guam. We'll wait for break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafa Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns the property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has the management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
It's Wrigley Field in Chicago. It's the seventh inning stretch. That means only two more innings to go today. And I've got Frenchie on the line, but before I pick up Frenchie, I want to read this little poem to you, okay? It starts out like this. Let's go, Brandon. I don't like your mental haze. I don't like your leftist ways. I do not like your sun on blow. I do not like you, Sleepy Joe. Let's go, Brandon. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, there you go. A very nice cup, a nice addition to anybody's cupboard. So here we go. We got Frenchie in the green room, and Frenchie, I want to thank you for that very timely and thoughtful gift of that coffee cup. It's exactly what I needed. I can't get enough Let's Go Brandon into this show.
Yeah, I figured that would help your morning to wake up. Yeah.
There you go.
Good to talk to you, Bob. So I'm calling to follow up on what the other Joe called regarding Marxist on Guam. And so because it seems like we need to repeat ourselves in order for people to really understand. The person I have been for the last 2 years accusing of being a undercover Marxist is Sabina Perez, who has been elected twice so far. And she's running again for office. She portrays herself as a Democratic senatorial candidate, and her goal is to environmental, financial, and social, and she wants to strengthen the environment laws, increase resource for implementation, protect critical habitats, cultural sites, and water resources, and increase the recycle effort. And I've gone over that several times. Sabina Perez is a member of at least 2 organizations that are Marxist from their foundation, and most of all, she is a member of the Women for Genuine Security, which is an offshoot of another group of women organization, which is called the International Women's Network Against Militarism. Those groups have been identified by the FBI in their 2015 report as having close ties to certain security apparatus in China and in North Korea. So this is not something that we should take lightly. Those are organizations that are met to fight for the militarization of islands in the Pacific and in other U.S. territory. Mrs. Perez was the host of the International Women's Network Against Militarism conference in 2017, and the things were Guam in the crosshair, women forging transnational solidarity and resistance to militarism, hosted by Vivian Dames and produced by David Lopez. You had Rebecca Garrison, who is a known Marxist from California, who is a PhD in American Studies and Ethnicity at USC. There is another Chamorita, but from Texas, whose name is Tiara Naputi, who is a PhD, University of Texas, Austin, and portrays herself as a member of the Chamorro diaspora. And they are all tied with Gwynne Kirk, with the founding member of International Women Network Against Militarism, and she is based in Denver, and has another group called Women for Genuine Security, and both groups advertise as having close tie with the Marxist movement, and especially the Socialist Worker of the United States, which is a Chinese Maoist communist party based in Minneapolis. So I think I couldn't be any clearer when you are portraying yourself as a Democratic Party candidate, that you are a senator of the Guam legislature, and at the same time you belong to those far-left groups. You owe the electors the honesty to come clean about those things, especially since Mrs. Perez is using her known goal of the ecology, ancestral land, water rights, and everything in order to slow down the military plan implementation on the island. That is a right to do so, but she should not do it under the guise that she is an activist for the ecologist movement. She's not. She's a far-left activist. She belongs to very dangerous, active groups, and one of the other person here on the island actually works for NPR. She's the head. So when you saw what Bob was showing about NPR telling us that they're going to be very neutral, you can start questioning that, because those people are very tied up. And they are also very close to protect Litekian, Pagan, Tinyan, and so on. And they are including Asian Pacific region against the construction of the Department of Defense live firing training range complex. And they are advocating for removing THAAD's missile from South Korea. So those are not people that are there just by accident. They have an agenda. They use the UOG to make conferences. They use the pro-independence movement to advance their thing, but they're advocating against the U.S. military here on Guam, in Puerto Rico, in Rota, in Tinyan, and other places. They also are tied to a group that's called Women Across the Demilitarized Zone, which is a North Korea-funded South Korean group that advocates for removing the DMZ in Korea. And so all those people are all tied up, and it's that Women Across the DMZ org actually came here on Guam and participated to all those reunions. So this is why I think it's dangerous, and this is why I am appalled that the mainstream media on the island does not confront Senator Perez with those facts. They know about it, and they choose to ignore it.
That's very good information, Frenchie. Senator Sabina Perez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
a red senator hiding as a green activist. I think that is called a watermelon, right?
Yeah, well, it's bad enough when we can't tell the difference between red and orange, but now we can't even tell the difference between green and red. We're really in bad shape.
And they're also very feminist in the sense that they are anti-masculinity against civilian and uniform males that threatens world peace and security.
And more than likely anti-family and
and so on, yeah.
And pro-abortion and all the rest of it, huh?
Yeah. But you know, when you have politicians that support North Korea, the CCP, under the guise that they are protecting the environment and ancestral land, I think it is fair game that people ask questions about it. And it is very disturbing that the local media is absolutely silent about those things.
Well, unless someone gives them a signed confession, there isn't anything for them to write on. You know,
with a press release.
Yeah, with a press release, yeah. Yeah, I've never seen a group of people with such a limited amount of curiosity as the media folks here on our island. Yeah. Well, thank goodness we got you, Frenchie, to blow the whistle on Sabina Perez and others of a similar ilk. So, good talking to you. I got to head for Churchill Downs, but it's always a pleasure. And thanks again for the cup, Frenchie.
You're welcome, and I hope you can enjoy your coffee with it.
I'll do it every day. Thank you.
All right.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate with cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want with your Visa debit card. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
We're already Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. That means it's the home stretch for Tall Tales for another day. And I've only got about 2 more furlongs before I cross the finish line. Next item on the card is Josh Walsh versus The Narrative. And this, of course, all goes back to rugby, boy. And the Post finally got it all together, and Saturday's sport page laid it out very clearly. Earlier this week, Guam Department of Education Superintendent, he's not Guam Department of Education, he's the Superintendent of Education. Superintendent of Education Don Fernandez wrote an email to Guam Rugby Union member Paul Claros that a transgender student athlete from Guam High School playing on the school's girls rugby team must be allowed to play. He wrote that disallowing the students' participation would directly violate Title IX, which protects against discrimination and in interscholastic sports. Fernandez' email was written after an issue arose on the season's opening day when a transgender member. I have to just digress here for a minute and point something out here. Back to cultural Marxism again. As indicated, cultural Marxism is closely related to the idea of political correctness. Angelo Codavilla explains this important idea in more detail. The notion of political correctness came into use among communists in the 1930s as a semi-humorous reminder that the party's interest is to be treated as a reality that ranks above reality itself. Treated as a reality that ranks above reality itself. Because all progressives, communists included, claim to be about creating new human realities, they are perpetually at war against nature's laws and limits. That's exactly what we're talking about here, guys. But since the reality does not yield, progressives end up pretending that they themselves embody these new realities. Hence, any progressive movement's nominal goal eventually ends up by being subordinated to the urgent, all-important question of the movement's own power, because that power is insecure as long as others are able to question the truth of what the progressives say about themselves and the world. Progressive movements end up struggling not so much to create the new promised realities as to force people to speak and act as if these were real. As if what is correct politically, that is, what thoughts serve the party's interest, were correct factually. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here. I've hit on it several times, but here we go. Fernandez' email was written after an issue arose on the season's opening day when a transgender member of Guam High girls rugby team allegedly injured at least 2 members of Teason High. A transgender member. No, he was not a transgender member. He was a boy. And I talked about this on Friday. We can't just say boy or girl. We got to say cisgender male, transgender female, etc. And it's exactly what this article is talking about. The idea is that, let me see here, where's that paper? All progressives, communists included, claim to be about creating new human realities. They are perpetually at war against nature's laws and limits. Nature's laws and limits. Boys are boys, girls are girls. But since reality does not yield, progressives end up pretending that they themselves embody these new realities. Hence, any progressive movement's nominal goal eventually ends up being subordinated to the urgent, all-important question of the movement's own power. Because that power is insecure as long as others are able to question the truth, like I do. What do you mean transgender female? It's a guy. His name is Rugby Boy. Progressive movements end up struggling not so much to create the promised new realities as to force people to speak and act as if these were real, as if what is correct politically were correct factually. And that's why I'm not going to get all hung up on this transgender, etc. There was a boy that wanted to play on Guam High's rugby team in the girls' game. You can put transgender in front of it all day long, but that's just exactly what we're doing here. We're trying to fool ourselves that something else is going on. So Fernandez decided the transgender's got to play, and then he said, you know why? Title IX. Title IX. Never any explanation beyond that. All you got to do is say Title IX. If you're ever, by the way, folks, if you're ever in an argument with anyone who can't see things your way, regardless of what you're arguing about, just get a hold, jump in and grab the floor, make the other person listen to you, and just say Title IX. And that's the end of the story for John Fernandez. No wonder he's resigning. No wonder he's hanging it up. He's probably so embarrassed over this. In the email, Fernandez told Claros that it was responsibility of GRU's referees to properly exercise their authority and discretion to ensure the safety of all matches and all athletes who participate in ISA competition. Well, if he's going to do that, he tells the guy to get off the field. That's what we're talking about. Fernandez also wrote that GRU's current rules do not address transgender issues. Then why are we having this conversation? And any amendments to his governance would have to wait until next season. So you can't do things, and this is exactly what that article said. You've got to make reality change to keep up with the politically correct speech. We look forward to learning more about the issue and working with GRU over the summer to set rules that will result in an inclusive, safe, and competitive season next year. I sure hope that rugby is inclusive next year. And I'm just wondering now, if boys can play in the girls' rugby league, how many people on 7 in this league, right? So the girls' rugby team that has 7 guys on it is going to be the league champion. How can they miss, right? Yeah, so Fernandez is looking for an inclusive, safe, competitive season next year. Can't be inclusive and competitive both, John. Fernandez wrote that in a media release. In response to Fernandez' email and media response, GRU Secretary Joshua Walsh wrote a letter obtained by the Guam Sports Network to GDOE Interscholastic Sports Association Coordinator Marv Linder. In that letter, Walsh wrote that GDOE was notified in March 2022 that interscholastic competition would be guided by World Rugby bylaws, even if you don't like them, which preclude male transgender athletes. Why not just say male athletes? From participating in women's rugby if they have not undergone the transitioning process before reaching puberty. That's a whole show right there. I'll just let it go for a while. But I'll just say this, so many athletes' careers have been ruined because they were taking drugs like steroids. Now it's a condition precedent. I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. We've come to the end of the home stretch here at Churchill Downs. Come back tomorrow, and right now it's time for me to say, let's go, Brandon. Thanks to you, Frenchie.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3. 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Fox News. Ukraine's President Zelensky presenting House Speaker Nancy Pelosi with the Order of Princess Olga Award following her visit to Kyiv over the weekend. In his nightly address Sunday, Zelensky said that he gave her the award for her significant contribution in the defense of freedom. Zelensky also thanking Speaker Pelosi and the other congressional members who visited him for affirming the U.S.'s commitment to help Ukraine.
Pelosi and her congressional delegation met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv for 3 hours, reinforcing American support of Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression.
Your fight is a fight for everyone. Our commitment is to be there for you until the fight is done.
Congress is now considering a request from President Biden for $33 billion in further aid for Ukraine. Zelensky thanked Pelosi's delegation for the visit, saying,
"We'll win, and we'll win together."
Fox's Kevin Uretsky. Evacuation beginning over the weekend for civilians holed up at a steel plant in Mariupol after almost 2 months of being trapped there. Germany shifting gears and is now planning to support the European embargo of Russian oil. West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin endorsing Republican Representative David McKinley and slammed the Biden administration's Build Back Better bill in a West Virginia GOP primary ad. Moderna trying to obtain FDA approval for emergency use authorization for its COVID-19 vaccine for children under 6 years old. Dr. Paul Burton, chief medical officer at Moderna, telling CBS's Face the Nation Sunday about the effectiveness of the vaccine.
The safety profile was very reassuring. Lower events of safety in this very young age group, even compared to the 6 to 12-year-olds.
America is listening to Fox News.
How quickly did you become